Most of my YouTube videos over the last 2 years have originated out of Pearland Regional Airport, and there are many YouTube videos that feature Pearland Regional Airport, and a lot of those are negative, describing accidents and mishaps because those are popular videos on YouTube. The Pearland Regional Airport website provides a more positive view of the airport. The website points out that LVJ is one of the busiest privately owned general aviation airports in Texas, hosting 3 fixed-wing flight schools and a helicopter school. Now, I happen to know that many pilots don't like that word busy, and so that would actually not be appealing to someone thinking of relocating to Pearland Regional Airport. However, there are advantages to being at a busy airport, and one of them is the availability of people to work on your airplane or improve your airplane. So there are multiple avionics shops at Pearland, and there are multiple aircraft and power plant mechanics available at the airport. LVJ has a rich history. It was established in 1947 as Clover Field, and that's one of the reasons why the designator is LVJ. The LV is from Clover. Originally it was all turf runways, and finally the runway was paved around 1980. And in 2003 the name was changed from Clover Field to Pearland Regional Airport. If you're planning to fly into Pearland Regional Airport for the first time, you don't need to watch this video. However, I think it might be useful. The point is, all the information you need is in the Houston sectional chart, the Houston terminal area chart, and in the various FAA publications. Nonetheless, I'm going to point out some things on the chart and also mention things that are not on the charts and not in the publicly available information. I relocated to Pearland in 2021, so I've only been here a few years. I can recall when I first went to Pearland Regional Airport to see if I could get checked out and rent aircraft, and I joined the Coastal Skies Aero Club. One of my concerns was all the controlled airspace around Pearland. Houston Class Bravo airspace is only 1.7 nautical miles from the end of the runway, and that airspace goes from the surface to 10,000 feet. Additionally, above the airport, you have, at an altitude of 2,000 feet, the beginning of the Houston Class Bravo airspace. The Ellington Class Delta airspace is a little farther away at 2.3 nautical miles. That airspace goes from the surface to 2,000 feet. But directly above the Ellington Class Delta is the Houston Class Bravo. I don't provide any of the radio frequencies because they could change, and you can find those frequencies on the aeronautical chart, or you can find them in other publications. When I was checked out as a pilot at Coastal Skies Aero Club, the instructor informed me about some of the local traditions and culture related to flying. For local pilots, Friendswood High School is a popular reporting point, even though it is not featured on the Houston sectional chart. Pilots new to the area are probably unfamiliar with this reporting point, and I've heard at least one pilot scold one of the local pilots for using Friendswood High School as a reporting point, saying that it's not on the sectional chart, and so it's not appropriate radio phraseology. Don't be that pilot. If you can imagine a typical traffic pattern for a Cessna 172 for runway 14, you can see how Friendswood High School could be used as a reporting point to prepare other pilots for your entry into the traffic pattern. Now, some local pilots are not great at using this reporting point. For example, some pilots will simply say, "I'm over the high school." That should be avoided because Pearland High School is northwest of the airport. So the response might be, "Which high school?" So if you are using Friendswood High School as a reporting point, you typically want to say, "I'm over Friendswood High School." You can be forgiven if you've been reporting 5 miles out and so on, because pilots know what direction you're coming from, and so they will anticipate when you report over the high school that you're over Friendswood High School. One of the problems with local tradition and local culture is it's not written down and it's not necessarily approved by the FAA. Some pilots use Friendswood High School as a direct entry point into a wider pattern. They are choosing to enter the pattern where the crosswind turn to downwind normally occurs. After you've flown at Pearland for a while, you'll begin to notice some landmarks that can be useful for defining your traffic pattern. I like to use this pond as a convenient landmark for turning base for runway 14. You've already seen where the Pearland website tells us about the 3 fixed-wing flight schools and the 1 helicopter flight school. Helicopters fly a right pattern. Because of the Houston-class Bravo, and also to a lesser extent the Arlington-class Delta airspace, pilots cannot extend the downwind leg for landing on runway 14. And now at Pearland, wind usually favors runway 14, so there is often congestion when many student pilots are flying touch-and-go patterns. An alternative to extending the downwind leg for landing on runway 14 is for departing aircraft to extend the upwind leg to accommodate aircraft trying to take off or enter the pattern. By the way, if you're having trouble finding LVJ, it's the General Aviation Airport with the radar dome. The Pearland Regional Airport diagram shows the layout of the airport. When landing on runway 14, the FBO is conveniently accessed via taxiway Alpha 4 or Alpha 3. I have identified what I'll call an unofficial hotspot. So due to congestion, aircraft on taxiway Alpha 2 northeast of the runway must taxi left onto runway 14 and then exit at Alpha 1 to make way for aircraft waiting to cross at Alpha 2 on the southwest side of the runway. Helicopters can originate from anywhere on the airport. There are several corporate helicopters located on the east side of the runway. Veracity Aviation operates the helicopter school circled in red. Helicopter pilots operating at LVJ are usually courteous and often give right-of-way to other aircraft. Nonetheless, exercise caution. Pearland Regional has 8 departure procedures and 7 arrival procedures. If you're an instrument-rated pilot, there is a single RNAV runway 32 approach procedure. When you're on an instrument flight plan, you're talking to air traffic control, so it's not surprising that the missed approach has you climbing into the Class Bravo airspace. I'll point out some hazards. These are very obvious by looking at the sectional chart, but it's worth noting. There are these 6 tall towers. They're very visible, they're very well lighted, but they are a hazard. They go up to 2,000 feet. If you're talking to Houston Approach, flying in that vicinity, they will almost certainly make sure that you have a visual reference to those towers. There are 3 tall towers to the south as well. These are, again, well lit, easy to identify. Probably a little riskier for some pilots. I know I have to be extra cautious because it's easy to be sightseeing and kind of lose track of the fact that there are some tall towers in the area because it's sparsely populated in that area. It's mostly marshland. And so these just rise up out of the wilderness, and so if you're not paying attention, they could be a problem. The label, "This general area is a popular location for training," essentially covers the area where the training tends to occur. So you'll find with reference to Pearland Regional Airport, there's a lot of pilot training to the southwest. When I was getting checked out by the Coastal Skies Aero Club, and when I've had subsequent flight reviews, I have found that instructors tend to go a little north of this area. I know some pilots like to dodge the Class Bravo, Class Charlie, Class Delta airspaces, and some pilots tend to be very negative about air traffic control. I have found that Houston air traffic controllers are usually courteous, patient, and helpful. but their demeanor depends heavily on circumstances. The more congested the airspace, the less friendly the controllers tend to be. You should not expect to fly north after departing LVJ. There is a common east-west route that is called the Interstate 10 Corridor. The Interstate 10 Corridor is not designated as a special flight rules area because you can legally fly VFR in the corridor below 2,000 feet and stay clear of Class Bravo airspace. If you want to fly north after departing LVJ, you'll likely be vectored to fly west of Sugar Land or east of Ellington before being vectored to the north. You can try to navigate below 2,000 feet west of the inner rings of Bush and Hobby, but you will likely encounter traffic and Class Delta boundaries when you get closer to David Wayne Hooks Memorial Airport. The Interstate 10 corridor doesn't really affect Pearland pilots unless they're on sightseeing trips, because if they want to go north, they've got to deal with that. If they want to go east or west, that's relatively easy. However, if you're a pilot transitioning the Houston Class Bravo airspace, the Interstate 10 corridor is very handy. It took me a little longer than I planned to make this video, and I've done some pretty heavy editing to keep it down to a reasonable time, but I'm sure there are things I've left out. I'm sure there are mistakes I've made, so feel free to comment. And thank you for watching.